In this tutorial, I'll be using exercise 4-40-1 to talk about drawings. Now, the main thing to keep in mind with drawings is everything needs to be drawn in the correct orientation for the drawing itself to really work the way that it's supposed to work. But the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to take the existing drawing that we have and go to File, New, select Drawing, and I'm going to call this 4-40-1D. And then I will go ahead and say OK. And for this particular drawing, just based on the general sizes, I'm going to use a B-size sheet. Now, if you use an A-size sheet, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. It is automatically going to scale the views based on what it feels best fits on the sheet that you're using. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and use B, and I'll say OK. Now, what the software is going to do is it's automatically going to generate the views. So we can see here I've got a top, front, and right side view. Well, what I want to do is I want to double click on this view because I want the view to be a little bit bigger. And I want to go through some of the stuff that you're going to find in this particular dialog box. So here we have the view, type is front, the name is front. I can change anything about the visible area, so it could be a full view, half view, partial view. I can clip it in the Z direction. Scale is what I want to take a look at. Now my default scale for the sheet is 0.5, and I can see that down here, and I want to change all of them. So I don't need to change the scale right here. I can also change, if it's a section view, I can have combined states, I can have the display style to show hidden or no hidden lines and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out because I really don't need to change anything in here, but I do want to make you aware that if you want to change this to no hidden lines, you would come in here to display style and click no hidden. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here where it says scale 0.5, and I'm going to double click that and change it to 1, and that's going to change the scale for the whole sheet. Now I want to move these around so that I have enough room to place all of the dimensions that I need. So I'm going to left click on this view, and then I'm going to press and hold right click until the little dialog box comes up, and then I can uncheck lock view movement. Now I have the ability to move the views, and what you'll notice is that it will not move the views out of alignment. There is a way to break that, but for the purposes of this week's exercises, we don't need to do that. The only other thing that I want to do is I want to put in a small isometric view up here just so that I can see exactly what's going on. So I'm going to click on General View, and I'm going to pick the center point right there from my drawing view, and I want this to be isometric. And when I move this out of the way, I can see that that's what I'm looking for, but I don't want it that big. So for this one, I'll go to Scale and do a custom scale of 0.75. I'll apply that, and I'll say Close. Now I have an isometric view that shows me how this thing actually looks with respect to the three views that I have. So at this point, I can begin my dimensioning. And the dimensioning for this is going to work somewhat similar to the way that you would dimension the objects in the actual part files. But one thing that I want to do is I want to bring in the center line for this piece. And the only way to bring in the center line for the piece is going to be over here on the Annotate tab. I want to click on Show Model Annotations. And then I'm going to pick on this view right here. And what it's going to do is it's going to show me every dimension that was used for creating this particular view. Now, I don't want to use all of these dimensions, but I do want to use some of these dimensions. But before I actually select the dimensions I want to use, I'm going to click on this button right here, which is going to bring up all the axes, and I can see A1 is right here. So I'm going to click it, and that's going to bring in A1 to this particular view, and I'll say Apply. Now we'll go back over to dimensions. Now, there's a few dimensions on here that I want to keep, but there's also some that I don't need, don't want, and don't even want to be seen. This 6 is a dimension that I can use. This 3.5 may be a dimension that I could use, but I would rather put that dimension up here. This 2.5 I know that I want to keep. This 1.25 here and this 1.5 here, and even my diameter of 1 are all dimensions that are going to be somewhat useful to me. So I'm going to go from there, and I'll go ahead and bring in the 3.5 and the 1.75 as well, even though that's not the way it's dimensioned in the book. So I'll go ahead and apply that and then cancel out of this dialog box, and now I have all of my dimensions. I am going to get rid of this one because I don't really like that particular dimension. Now with some of these it loses the gap, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to recreate the gap so that my dimensions are not running over my object. Keeping the gap integrity is basically the only thing that allows us to know what the difference between the dimension and the object line is to have that gap. So this is a little bit of a process to go through, but once you're done you can basically be rid of all of the gaps and stuff like that we have on the screen. Now a couple of other things I want to do. I want to get rid of all of the points that are on here. I want to get rid of all of the coordinate system displays. I want to get rid of the planes, and I want to get rid of the center lines. Once I do that, I'm going to click this button here for repaint. Now the only center line that should stay is the one that I got from the model. So here I've got basically all the dimensions that I wanted for this view in now, except I want to place a dimension for this. So I'll click on dimension, select this line, and then middle click to place that dimension. Now there is one place where we can get into a little bit of trouble, and I'm going to delete this one even though it's a valid dimension to show you. When I click on dimension, if I select this circle, it's going to want to give me a radius. If you have a full circle or you need to call this out with a diameter, this is not going to work. However, if you double click and then bring it out, it will give you the diameter that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this, and now I'm going to continue dimensioning the rest of my object. So I'm going to come back up here to dimension, grab from here to here, place that over here. This cutout right here, I'm going to do all of the dimensioning for that right here. So there we have one. Let me pull this out over to here for the 0.5, and this I'm going to put up here for the 1.5. We'll say OK to that, and now I gotta shrink this dimension back a little bit so that it's not overlapping my geometry. So in comparing with the book what I've got so far, I need another dimension right here. Excuse me. So when I take a look, I've got my 6, I've got the 3.5. I need a dimension for this particular line, so I don't want it to be a line, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and get rid of this dimension, and I will go back to the dimension tool. Now one thing that this does not really allow you to do is pick points, so picking the dimension for this is going to be a little bit tricky. So that's just a bad click altogether. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come down here where I can dimension it straight from this line. We'll go to dimension and put in that 2 right there. Now there's a way that you can change that align dimension to a linear dimension, but for this week I'm really just trying to focus on getting you guys to dimension the objects that we have. So I've got my overall 6, I've got my 2, I've got my 1.5 in here, I got the 1.25 height, the 2.75 height, the diameter of 1, the 1.5 for here, the 3.5 off the backside for here. I've got all of the dimensions necessary to create the cutout, and I've got all the dimensions necessary for all the fillets that I have. So for all intents and purposes, I have all of the dimensions that I need. Now it's time to evaluate my views a little bit. If this drawing were more complex, I would have tons and tons of hidden lines all over the place. Some of them good, some of them not so good. I just want to stick with keeping my views as simple as possible, and to do that, in some cases you may want to remove hidden lines. In this case, since I only have the hidden lines for this here, and this one here to show the bottom of the groove, it's not enough hidden lines to make my life any more complicated than it already is, so I can stick with what I've got here, and I'm going to go ahead and save this file. And I'm just going to save it in the same location as the drawing file, and this is where you're going to want to start to maintain some file management techniques by having your part file, your drawing file, and your PDF file all in the same. Now, once you're satisfied that everything is correct and that you've got everything in that you need to have in, then what you're going to want to do is publish this. So I'm going to come up here to the Publish tab, and I'm going to click on PDF and Export. Now, make sure before you do this that you uncheck all these boxes and hit Repaint, or you'll actually publish it with all of that reference information on here. So I'm just going to call it 4-40-1D. I'm going to say OK, put it in that same folder with the rest of my files, and the software is going to go ahead and generate a PDF file based off of what I have right here. Now, as soon as this is done, it's going to bring up that PDF so that I can look at it, I can see it. Now, at this point, if you realize that you made a mistake, go ahead and delete this PDF, make the changes on the DRW file, and then regenerate the PDF after you're done. That way you can make sure that you always have exactly what you need in the case of these drawing files. Now, you do have a couple of additional drawing files to create other than just this one for this week, but these are the only ones that I'm actually going to have the tutorials for. I want you guys to go through and play with the different options and stuff like that that you have from within the actual drawings. Just realize your layout is where you actually grab your views from and can pick your views. Your annotate is where you get your show model annotations, it's where you get your dimensions, it's where you get all the rest of the information, and then publish is where you go to create a PDF. Now, the biggest thing is going to be making sure that your object is in the proper orientation before you even start the drawing. Notice that it created these three views automatically for me. Next week we'll take a look at how to do this all from scratch without these views being automatically generated. So just take your time on this week's assignments. This is all I'm looking for is a PDF file. You don't have to submit all the files. All I want is the PDF complete with all the dimensions necessary to manufacture the part.